Hi everyone, this is Chris and welcome to the second video in this series on learning Tai Chi basics. Last week in the first video we were looking at the importance of posture, breathing and being relaxed by learning the standing post posture. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to add what we learned in video 1 to stability and movement in Tai Chi. And Tai Chi is all about movement, the shifting of our center of gravity from one leg to the other throughout the form. So I'm going to show you a stance that is quite commonly used in the Tai Chi form. It's called the bow stance, but I'm also going to explain to you the movement principle of Tai Chi and how we shift the weight from one side to the other. In order to do this, I'm going to introduce you first of all to the Tai Chi symbol. And Tai Chi is primarily a philosophy first and foremost, and it's a philosophy that was added to martial arts exercises to create a system of what's called Tai Chi Chuan or Tai Chi boxing or Tai Chi fist. Now the symbol you see here, you've probably seen it before somewhere. It's quite a common symbol, but you might not realise that it's extremely old. It was first developed in ancient China about 3,000 years ago. It's called the Tai Chi symbol, but it's also known as the yin-yang symbol, and it's named after the three elements that make up this symbol. You have the two complementary opposites of yin and yang, and the white light part is yang and the dark part is yin. But also you'll see a third bit. You'll see a white dot, a yang dot within the yin part, and you'll see a dark part. You'll see a yin dot within yang. And this is meant to represent in Chinese mythology that first of all there was yin, there was darkness, but within yin contained the seed of light, the seed of yang, and that began to grow and expand and then became yang. So yang originates from yin, but because this is a dynamic relationship where yin and yang expand and contract, what that means is yang must therefore return to its original yin state in order for it to re-emerge again. So this symbol also within a circle represents constant change, constant movement, and the circle is actually meant to turn like this. It's a universal philosophy that has been around in China for thousands of years, and this philosophy has been applied to martial arts exercises to create the exercise and martial art of Tai Chi Chuan. About 700 years ago, a Taoist Chinese monk called Zhong Sanfeng came up with a radical idea of applying this philosophy to martial arts, and he came up with the idea of Tai Chi Chuan. Now, in relation to understanding this, a lot of people, you'd be amazed actually how many people in Scotland have this as a tattoo. And if I see people with a tattoo or a t-shirt and I ask them, why are you wearing that? You know, well, what does it mean to you? They'll often say, well, it kind of symbolises for me personally that sometimes I'm a wee bit good, sometimes I'm a wee bit bad. I'm a complex blend of both. But in fact, actually, this is a kind of misunderstanding of what this symbol actually represents. There are no comparative value. There's no comparative value in yin and yang. It's positive and negative. It's not good or bad. So the nearest analogy that we can draw from our lives in Western culture is a battery. If you look at a Duracell battery, the copper top, you'll see there's a plus sign at the top of the battery and a minus sign at the bottom. And this represents that with a battery it must have two complementary opposites, positive and negative, in order for the battery to work. Without that, the battery doesn't work. So again, we can use this analogy to help us understand the Tai Chi symbol. It's about positive and negative, two complementary opposites. Now, this can also lead to another misunderstanding in relation to how Tai Chi is actually pronounced and spelt, because people hear the term Tai Chi and the way it's spelt, T-A-I-C-H-I, which is the most common way it is spelt in the West, thinking it has something to do with energy, because the Chinese word for energy is Qi. But in fact, that's actually a misunderstanding and a mispronunciation. It's a wee bit like the way we say and spell Brazil. We spell Brazil with a Z, B-R-A-Z-I-L, and we pronounce it Brazil. And we tend to spell things in the West, in English language countries, the way we hear them. But in fact, the country of Brazil, the language is Portuguese, and it's actually spelt B-R-A-S-I-L. It's Brazil, not Brazil. So again with Tai Chi, it's not Tai Chi, it's Tai Chi, T-A-I-J-I. And Tai Chi actually in contemporary Chinese translates as the big everything, the ultimate, the grand ultimate, something that is universal. And that's different from this idea of big energy. So we should pronounce and say Tai Chi, T-A-I-J-I, but in the West you'll see it on books and on the internet, it's more commonly spelled as T-A-I-C-H-I. Either way it's fine, but you must understand that Tai Chi does not necessarily translate as big energy. Tai Chi, their correct spelling and translation, means the big everything, something that's completely universal, that applies to everything in the universe, a big idea, a big philosophy. Okay, I hope that hasn't completely confused you, and you might be wondering, how is this got to do with the exercise of Tai Chi Chuan? Well, I'm going to show you how this idea of complementary opposites, yin and yang, how this applies to movement. And the first thing we're going to learn is the bow stance. Okay then friends, so now we're going to learn the bow stance. And it's helpful when we're learning postures in different stances to keep in mind this idea of a clock face and following the directions of the hands of the clock in relation to our feet and legs. So I want you to first of all just imagine you're standing at the center of a clock face, feet together. And what we're going to do first of all is what's called the left bow stance, which means the left foot is forward. So we're going to take a step forward with the left foot, with the left toes and feet pointed towards 12. We're going to take a small step back towards 6 o'clock with the right foot. Going to keep the left foot still, and the right foot is going to go out towards 3 o'clock. And we're going to turn the right toes towards 1 and 2 o'clock. Now you can see that leaves a gap between the heels, and that gap is quite important, and I'll explain why in a second. The next thing we do is now align our posture, and similar to the principles we learned in the standing pose posture, we're going to bend the knees slightly, so we've got a spring in the posture, bringing the hips forward, tucking the pelvis forward so we can relax the center. The weight is forward, 70% of the weight is on the front foot, in this case the left foot, and about 30% of the weight on the back foot. Shoulders relaxed, back nice and straight, head up and chin back. Now also what we want to try and be careful of is that we want to make sure that the knees are pointing in the same direction as the toes. Knees are strange animals. It's like they've got magnets in them, and the knees always seem to want to come together. So we want to try and avoid that. So we want to make sure always when we're standing in this posture or when we're moving in this posture that the knees don't collapse inwards, that they remain in the same direction as the toes. Now that's the left bow stance. And now the right bow stance, same again. Imagine the center of a clock face. Take a step forward now with the right foot, right toes pointing towards 12. Left foot comes back a wee bit towards 6. Now the left foot goes out towards 9 o'clock. Left toes point towards 10 and 11 o'clock. Bending the knees, tucking the pelvis forward, the waist is forward, relaxing, having the head up and the chin back. And this is now the right bow stance. So I'll show you the left bow stance from a side view, so you get a side view of this. So again, we step forward, take a slight step back, foot goes out, turning the toes at 45 degrees, bending the knees, tucking the pelvis forward, relaxing the shoulders, keeping the head up and the chin back. The other thing to remember is you want to keep the hip joints level. So the way to do this, if you're not sure if the hip joints are level, just place the hands on the hips and just feel where your hip joints are. If you find that the rear hip joint is a wee bit higher, then what to do is just raise the front hip joint so the hips are level. Okay, and having the hips level is quite a tricky thing to get when you're first learning this posture, unless you're standing in front of a full-length mirror. So placing the hands on the hips, just getting a feel for your hips, where they are in relation to your posture, and then just adjusting, but making sure that the waist is forward and the majority of the weight is on the front leg. Now, in relation to this gap between the heels, this is quite important. So what we want to do is actually draw an imaginary line between the heels of 45 degrees. And this 45 degree line, or the alignment principle, is actually really important in Tai Chi. Now I know that some Tai Chi instructors, when they teach Tai Chi, teach this movement of going backwards and forwards on a direct line, forwards and backwards. I don't teach that, and I'll explain why for a second. I teach the 45 degree diagonal line principle, and I'll explain to you what that means with the help of a big stick. This gap between the heels is important, and if we were to draw an imaginary line, symbolised by this stick, between the heels, that would be a 45 degree line. So when I teach Tai Chi, I always teach that this movement follows this 45 degree line. So the trick here is just imagine that line is a railway track, and that the waist is a railway carriage, and you're moving the waist backwards and forwards along a diagonal line. So this is called the alignment principle. Now when you do this, when you shift the weight backwards and forwards, what you're doing is you're changing your center of gravity. It's moving from one leg to the other. So one leg becomes more dynamic than the other leg. So this is the yin-yang principle applied to the posture, applied to the movement of your center of gravity in the body, which appears around about the abdomen. This is your center of gravity around about the abdomen, or the dantian, as the Chinese call it. Dantian is the center of the body, or energy center, that's what the Chinese call it. Now, with this alignment, you always have what's called a direction of energy. And again, Tai Chi Chuan is a martial art. So this direction of energy is important in relation to how we generate power and energy in Tai Chi. And this railway line, for want of a better phrase, can actually turn. You can change the angle of it. So if I change the angle of the railway line, the alignment, the direction of energy, to forward, then what we do is we change the angle of our posture. So we just imagine there's a pole down the center of our body, and the waist area, the shoulders, going to rotate around this pole, and you'll see that I've not changed the angle of my feet, I've just changed the angle of the posture in line with this direction of energy line. So we go backwards, forwards, along this line. So this alignment principle that's moving backwards and forwards is more stable and also creates greater power, generates a lot of power from the ground, via the legs, through the center and through the arms. Now, why is alignment important? Well, I'm going to show you a wee trick. You can have a wee go out at home, and I want you to try this and see how you get on with this wee trick. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just grab a chair, and what I'd like you to do is just sit straight in the chair with your hands on your knees. Just relax, just breathe, and what I want you to do first of all is just stand up normally and then sit back down again. Okay, now what I'd like you to do is just relax, bring your mental awareness into the body, and you're going to do exactly the same thing again, but this time I want you to be aware of how your body moves when you stand, in particular what happens in the upper body. Okay, so we're going to stand up after 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now if you're aware of what's happening in the body, you'll realize that when you stand up, you have to throw your body weight forward. The center of gravity in the body has to move forward in order for you to stand up. Okay, don't take my word for it. Place the hands across the chest. Now what I'd like you to do is just try and stand up, but without throwing your upper body forward. Try and stand up, keeping your upper body as straight as you can. Okay, after 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and you'll see and you'll feel that actually that's quite a hard thing to do. Now the reason why that is because if you draw an imaginary line between the heels, your center of gravity is set back from that line. Your center of gravity is no longer over that line because you're sitting in this posture. You've got a zigzag shape coming out from the feet, along the upper legs, up spine. It's a zigzag shape. So the center of gravity is not over the line. So now we're going to do this exercise again. What you're going to do now is bring the feet back just as far as is comfortable. To cross the hands in front of the chest, and again this time we're going to stand up, and we're going to stand straight up without actually throwing our upper body forward. So after 3, 1, 2, 3, and you'll see it's a lot easier. Okay, and the reason why it's a lot easier is by bringing the feet back, you've actually shifted that line between the feet back under your center of gravity. So alignment is important in relation to stability in order to keep your center of gravity over that line. It's important for stability in movement, but also for generating power in Tai Chi. One other thing to say, folks, is when you're doing the 24-step Tai Chi form, if you ever want to learn it and you want to practice the Tai Chi form, the important thing to understand is you don't need to take big steps. You don't need to have a big long bow stance. In fact, the Tai Chi form, 24-step form, is meant to be done in a much more upright posture. You don't have to have long legs, and you don't have to take a big long stance. Being nice and relaxed is the most important and fundamental thing. But there has to be that gap between the heels. The waist has to be forward. That front foot has to be forward, and that right foot has to be behind it. And that creates a stable posture. If you want to learn more about Tai Chi, Tai Chi Chuan, then I would definitely recommend this book. It's called Tai Chi Chuan Simplified Form by Master Liang Shou Yu. Very good book. You can get this on Amazon, and if you'd like to know more, then I would definitely recommend this book. Okay then friends, the last thing I'm going to show you is a traditional Chinese salutation. Whenever I teach a Tai Chi class, we always finish with this particular salutation. It's an ancient Chinese tradition. And how we do it is we bring the right hand up in front of the chest, making a fist. This represents the sun. Bring the left hand up over, and it wraps over the fist, and this represents the moon. Sun and moon, heaven and earth. And we bow to each other out of respect of people's integrity, dignity and equality. And until next time.